Hey everybody, it is Kenny Kane here with the one and only Jamie Silber. Now, many current members at CrossFit Los Angeles know Coach Silber as the leader of our triathlon team. The last couple of years, we've had a very successful triathlon team that's gone out and done very well in a local competition. But the intent of this video is to go beyond the guy who gets CrossFitters ready to go jump in the water for the first time or get on a bike and ride it for more than just a mile or ride it down on the boardwalk. The intent of this is to kind of like dive into Jamie and how he found himself here. So I know this much about you, Jamie. You've been personal training for 27 years and you've been competitive triathloning for pretty much the exact same time. So for the last 3 decades, you've been busying yourself with swimming, biking, running, and then the fitness of other people. How did you get into triathlon and into personal training?
Triathlon started first in college. We happen to know a local triathlete named Scott Tinley, who's become a legend in sports since retired. And he was kind enough to outfit our cross-country team. And one day he said, after cross-country meet, come down, we're going to do an open water swim. I want you guys to watch this triathlon thing going on. And it was an informal meet in San Diego back in 1987 in the early years of triathlon. And as just pure runners, we were watching these guys get out of the water and then run, then get on their bikes and then run. And we just thought it was fascinating. And early that cross-country season, we did an informal triathlon. Our coach thought it was a great idea. It was our senior year. And I think a lot of us thought it was just silly, ridiculous. I thought it was amazing because I wasn't the best runner on the team, but I had this propensity to swim well without training. And running was at the end, so I figured the best sport was at the end. And it was only a year later that I did my first triathlon because of that.
So your first triathlon then was in 1988.
1988.
Yeah, and that's right as triathlon started to get pretty big. Side story about Tinley, I in the mid-90s was doing the Wildflower Triathlon, and he was warming up, and I was wearing basically he had his own clothing line, and it was a Speedo with a crotch pad. And that's
there was some neon just to make sure attention was diverted right there.
Lots of neon right in the front. And I was kind of starstruck at the point.
Yeah.
And so we were warming up for the swim, and I look over, I'm like, oh shit, this guy. And so I tap him on the shoulder, I'm like, I'm wearing your stuff.
That's you.
He shook his head and then warmed up and then went on to win that race. Anyway, and I barely finished, so it was a hot day. Too many big bars and too many power bars. But you start triathlon in '88 as a competitor, right as the sport's starting to grow. By '89, '90, the thing starts to really pop. And then in the early '90s, then you start to transfer from being an athlete into a coach.
Yeah, the coaching was sort of a natural progression because as an athlete out of college, you're trying to find your way in the world and you want to know what your skill sets are. And back then it was either education. I was an education major with exercise science minor, and I knew a lot about physiology. I knew a lot about teaching and creating lessons. And it wasn't until a gym owner asked me to teach running in his gym. And I was here in Southern California, and the personal training business was huge then. And I was seeing the revenue come in. I was also seeing the excitement in the industry. But I was mainly a runner. I didn't really have a strong background in fitness prescription other than just running. And when I got certified through a national organization called the National College of Sports Medicine, NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine, that's when I started to see that as a profession and a way that I could profoundly use a lot of my education from teaching and running and then get certified through a governing body and start to lend that to a clientele. And I always had an interest in teaching people endurance, but at the same time, the foundation of endurance training is strength and conditioning.
So tell me then, how did you find yourself into CrossFit, specifically CrossFit Los Angeles? Because a lot of times the endurance community by nature has a built-in antagonism with strength and conditioning programs like CrossFit.
Well, speaking of antagonistic, there's Andy Petranek. He was from the endurance community, but he was this big guy that was doing really well in endurance. And I would always be confounded how this guy that was somewhat short in stature, heavily donned with muscle and mass, was doing these incredible 24-hour adventure races. And he wasn't just walking through these backpacks on. there was running elements, there was swimming elements. And he would say, Jamie, come on over to the gym, check it out, look what I'm doing. I'm like, no, I'm okay, just moving my linear pathway. I'm gonna stay on the straight path, teach my clients the basic fundamentals of just, functional movements, but nothing in the area of Olympic lifting or gymnastics. And it wasn't until 3 years ago, in the twilight of my fitness career, after competing in triathlon and staying with my private clientele, and he said, come over to CrossFit LA. And that was 3 years ago, last week, and it blew my mind. Back then, there wasn't an introduction sort of fundamental course. I was sort of thrown into the fire a little bit, but with great coaching, great hands-on, and eyes on me. And they knew I had a propensity for handling a hard workout, but at the same time, my mechanics were terrible. So right away, I knew structurally and fundamentally my ability to move in all these new pathways and express all these new fitness domains was there was a deficit in my resume when it came to being as best I could be. And I really came to CrossFit LA not only with the assistance of Andy's antagonistic sort of insistence I get here, it was also because I got in a bike accident. And I spent a lot of time just sitting in my butt trying to rehab myself. And I didn't have the tools, I had an education in fitness training on how to structurally get my shoulders back into good shape and really work on my midline and get my lower back and my hips moving again. And CrossFit was a natural step for me personally, and now, of course, it's become a profession.
So, as you introduced your training, so you started splitting your training as an athlete.
Yeah.
You started splitting your training, a little bit of CrossFit, a little bit of swimming, biking, and running.
Yeah, shortly after the experiment began. And to your point, it was sort of like, how do I divide up that time? And being an endurance athlete, you get addicted to swim, bike, and run because it's social, it's engaging, you're interacting with your environment, and it's challenging. But then CrossFit became something else fascinating because I started feeling some really good results from just the basic movements of just how to perform a squat better, how to actually jump better, how to actually get speed with my hips and get more power from just fundamental movements, and how I can translate that over to swim, bike, and run. So I decided to do an experiment in my first year at CrossFit was to reduce my overall training volume in swim, bike, and run by about 30%, meaning that if I swam, bike, and ran in a week's time, maybe about 15 hours of training, which is about average for a competitive triathlete, I brought that down to about 11 hours, and I substituted that time with CrossFit.
Right.
And within 9 months, started competing with that sort of method of reducing time in my single sport endeavors and putting CrossFit as there to take up the time and the volume of training. All of a sudden, I started seeing faster times over broad distances, from sprint to Olympic. I started transitioning faster. My lower back and my shoulder pains were going away because I had strength and really good structural integrity in those joints. And now it's 3 years later, and I'm finding myself, without training that much in swim, bike, and run, I'm finding myself on the podium. I'm able to race more. I'm able to have more energy throughout the day to actually give my clients the energy they need to.
Jamie's very humble. You have to kind of pry results out of him. This last weekend, he won a local competition. Which race did you win this last weekend?
Breath of Life.
Breath of Life. And then, not just that, Jamie is a consistent competitor nationally, but also internationally. Last year, you finished what number?
Last year was the World Championships of Triathlon, where they test the grand final for the professionals, and all the age groupers from around the world that qualify within their state go to the World Championships. And I was up there against the best age group champions, and I was in 2 events. And the first event's called a Crossfit, and that's pronounced correctly. And that's a swim-run event where you swim as fast as you can and run as fast as you can. And I got 4th in the world in my age group. And then the next event 2 days later was triathlon, which is the main sport that they tested there. And I placed 7th in the world, and I was the first American across the line.
So, number 1 in America, number 7 in the world in triathlon, and number 4 in the quathlon. It says a lot about his current competitive performance nationally and globally. But beyond that, as we sort of understand the amount of time that Jamie's given this personal training, coaching, and training himself has led him to be the coach of our triathlon program here at CrossFit Los Angeles. And that's one of the things that we're really starting to focus on is the mastery of coaching. And Jamie, in my view, reflects that very deeply, and that he can take any group who's never experienced triathlon and turn them into not just capable triathletes, but successful triathletes using just a handful of basic skills in a short amount of time. So, Jamie, we've got a town hall meeting coming up July 15th here at CFLA. Now, you don't necessarily have to be a CFLA member. If you know somebody that would like to join the CFLA trail team, by all means encourage them to do so. CrossFit gives you the foundation to go out and do this stuff. But Jamie is as expert as they come with turning great triathletes into better triathletes, and people who've never even been in the water into people who can 3 months later successfully do this thing. So Jamie, break down very quickly for us what's going to happen at the town hall meeting and what people can expect if they've never experienced you coaching and the triathlon program here at CFLA.
So a recap, 3 years ago when we launched this program for the first time, our goal was to attract CrossFitters to the endurance world in triathlon. And I was a little bit nervous because I was inexperienced as a CrossFitter back then, but I was doing my own experiment with how to incorporate CrossFit into triathlon training. But what I easily found out quickly was that CrossFitters naturally have this predisposition to be really good at skill sets. I mean, their technique is incredible when it comes to movement. When we talk about swim, bike, and run training, which we'll review in depth and how we go about that at our meeting, CrossFitters just seem to be naturally adept at swimming, biking, and running. All we really had to do was just lay the foundation for them, and then they were off and running. So if you've never experienced a triathlon before, or even seen one, we'll go delve deep into what a triathlon is and what you can expect from the program. But don't be worried about your experience. If you only have experience in one sport or no sport, swimming, biking, or running, come to the meeting, and I guarantee you'll see some light, and you'll see how a lot of things translate.
So there it is, the legendary, and he is pretty legendary because being, number one in the country at anything is pretty badass in my view, and then just being able to say the word quathlon, let alone be globally ranked in it, is pretty cool too. So if you haven't experienced Jamie Silber, it's time to do that. If you know about it, time to do it again and get a little bit better. Jamie Silber is the man to deliver your endurance capabilities using CrossFit and functional fitness as a foundation. Jamie, true masterful coaching. Anytime I watch you coaching the run, the swim, and the bike, and it is a complete joy to have you on staff. You guys,
my pleasure.
Go get some silver lining. It's awesome. Ding. Thanks, Jamie.
Got it.
Cool.